two oceans collide off the Cape, and somewhere between that Atlantic swell and Indian Ocean drift, you find a military that once built mine-proof trucks so good the world copied them, and now fights to keep frigates out of dry dock and jets out of hangars. That contradiction is the South African National Defence Force, clever, tough, battle-experienced, and chronically underfunded. Is it insanely powerful? In some ways, absolutely. In other ways, it's like a rugby team that shows up with world-class tactics and 3 working boots. Backstory first. The SANDF was born in 1994 from a complex merger of former adversaries, then spent the next 3 decades proving it could deploy far beyond the Limpopo. It built a staff culture that punches above its weight, a special forces tradition that scares the right people, and an industry that turned V-shaped hulls into a global MRAP revolution. Even today, the official budget plan talks like a force that intends to do more than parade, border safeguarding, regional peace operations, and a mix of air and sea patrols to police 2 oceans. The trouble? Money is the gravity in every sentence. In 2025/26, the Department of Defense was allocated about 57.18 billion rand, roughly 0.8% of GDP, with 2/3 going to salaries, leaving a thin slice for fuel, spares, and training hours. Targets call for around 12,000 flying hours and 8,000 sea hours a year. That's a respectable aspiration, but hitting it while funding foreign deployments is like juggling chainsaws on a tightrope. The tightrope's on fire. Let's zoom out and put South Africa on the African scoreboard. Egypt remains the continental heavyweight in raw mass. Hundreds of combat aircraft across F-16s, Rafales, and MiG-29s variants, plus a vast army and navy, while Nigeria leans on scale, counterinsurgency experience, and ongoing modernization, including a 2024 deal to buy 24 M346 fighter aircraft from Italy's Leonardo. In spending terms, the SIPRI dataset shows Africa diverging. North Africa climbed in 2024, while Sub-Saharan Africa slipped, largely because South Africa tightened its belt. In plain English, Cairo buys big, Abuja spends to fight at home, and Pretoria tries to keep a sophisticated, expeditionary force humming on less than 1% of GDP. That's regional power ranking by wallet size, not talent. Numbers quickly and in perspective. South Africa's defense budget is approximately 0.8% of GDP in 2025/26. Nigeria's headline security and defense line for 2025 is in the multi-trillion naira bracket. Even if that includes police and internal security, it signals political priority. Egypt's overall state budget is enormous in Egyptian pound terms and under International Monetary Fund discipline. But the key takeaway for us is that Cairo sustains a much larger force structure with consistent procurement lines, while Pretoria runs a high-skill, low-mass model. Different games, same board. Now, power is what you can do today. So let's switch from the spreadsheet to the field and tell a story that shows SANDF power and its limits. Mozambique, May 2024. As the SADC mission in Mozambique, SAMIM, prepared to wind down after 3 years, insurgents struck the town of Macomia from multiple directions. Mozambican bases were hit hard. The SANDF, whose mission, Operation Vakela, had deployed up to 1,495 troops at its peak, had already begun drawing down to Pemba ahead of the July mandate end. The attack was a grim reminder that exits create windows. Terrorists like windows. South African troops held their piece of ground, but the message was clear. Once the regional umbrella folds, the storm returns. It's a sharp, real-world snapshot of South African capability, disciplined infantry, protected mobility, and hard-earned bushcraft, tempered by political clocks and budget ceilings. Before Macomia, Operation Vakela had been a 3-year lesson in persistent presence. South African infantry rotated through Cabo Delgado with engineers, medics, and air support, stabilizing key routes and partnering alongside Mozambique's forces and a major Rwandan contingent. It wasn't flashy. It was patrols, ambush drills, route clearance, and the quiet tyranny of logistics, fuel, food, and rotor hours. When Samim ended in mid-July 2024, Rwanda stayed under a bilateral deal, underscoring a hard truth. When the money and mandate end, someone else has to keep holding the line. That's not a knock on the SANDF, it's the physics of peace support. Now, zoom back to the force itself. Boots on the ground first. The South African Army remains the backbone. Disciplined, motorised and mechanised infantry, artillery that still bites, and armour that, while old, has crews who know how to fight. The indigenous MRAP lineage isn't just history, it's a living advantage in survivability and mobility. On the border, the army protects long, porous frontiers and is increasingly leaning on sensors, UAVs, and cameras to stretch manpower, a smart trade when budgets are thin. The weakness here isn't brains or bravery, it's depth. Enough vehicles fully mission capable, enough spares on the shelf, enough ammo to sustain a real fight. The budget book says the quiet part out loud. Compensation eats the pie, and technology has to multiply the force.
Let's move from boots to the tarmac. The South African Air Force still fields one of Africa's few true 4th-gen fighter fleets, Saab Gripen CDs, backed by Hawk trainers for lead-in fighter training, and a rotor wing built around the Oryx transport and the iconic Rooivalk. When the support contracts are live and spares flow, Gripens are a serious deterrent in the region. BVR missiles, modern sensors, and pilots with standards shaped by decades of rigorous training. In March 2025, 13 Gripen airframes were reported available and serviceable under an active support contract. That's the good day. On bad days, the helicopter fleet's availability turns the map red. Oryx and Rooivalk need money, parts, and specialised maintenance. More than once, deployments have outrun the sustainment tail. An expired or underfunded contract isn't just a paperwork problem, it's a medevac that can't launch. Quick pit stop in the cockpit of regional comparison. Egypt's air arm is vast and getting better. Western and Russian types, precision weapons, and serious training pipelines. Nigeria, meanwhile, is buying for the wars it's actually fighting. M346s to add jets and training capacity, on top of Super Tucanos and JF-17. South Africa's bet is different. Fewer jets, more capable, with pilots who can do multi-role operations across long distances. When serviceable, that's a scalpel. When grounded, it's a museum. Let's switch from the tarmac to the open sea. The South African Navy's Valor-class frigates are among the most capable surface combatants south of the Sahara. Stealth shaping, flight decks, and a locally integrated vertical launch Umkhonto SAM system that has even found export homes. Below the waves, Type 209 submarines give Pretoria a stealth surveillance and sea denial tool its neighbours lack. Here's the sting: serviceability. As of mid-2025, official commentary acknowledged only 1 of 4 frigates and 1 of 3 submarines were even partially operational, thanks to dockyard bottlenecks and stretched refit budgets. You can't project power from a pier. And yet, when a frigate sails with Umkhonto in the cells and a Superlynx on deck, it's the maritime equivalent of a no-nonsense sign posted across the Mozambique Channel. The hidden engine behind all this is industry. Denel, the state-owned prime, has lurched through a lost decade and, in mid-2025, announced its first unaudited profit since 2016. It's fragile, but it matters. Umkhonto's continued upgrades, land-based variants, and export references prove South Africa can still design, integrate, and field credible missiles. That sovereign capacity has real deterrent value. If the world gets busy and the supply chain gets slow, Pretoria can still do the hard engineering in-house if the books stay in the black and the talent sticks around. That if remains capital letter large. Okay, scale it. What does insanely powerful look like in practice, not in brochures? Imagine a flare-up in the Mozambique Channel, pirate-style attacks spiking against LNG shipping, a single Valor-class frigate with embarked helicopter, backed by a submarine in shadow and coordinated with Air Force surveillance, changes the behaviour of every small boat within 200 nautical miles. Add coastal radar and a few well-timed boardings, and you're rewriting the local rulebook in a week. The constraint isn't capability, it's whether the dockyard cleared the refit in time.
Now, what happens when boots hit the ground in the DRC? South African troops have been rotating into the Kivus for years. They know the terrain, the tactics, and the enemy's habits. But 2024 to 2025 brought painful reminders. Mortar and rocket fire from M23 killed South African soldiers and forced hard questions at home about resourcing and mission design. Without enough helicopters, and especially without Rooivalks providing overwatch, every road move is a bet. The SANDF fights smart, but force protection rides on serviceable rotors and the ability to move fast under fire. That's not a nice to have. It's the difference between a planned rotation and a casualty evacuation.
Back to Mozambique for a concrete lesson. During Operation Vikela 2021 to 2024, SANDF units partnered with Mozambican forces, guarded key nodes, and kept pressure on insurgent lines of movement. The mission never had Hollywood mass. It had professional discipline, MRAP mobility, and the slow grind of presence. When Macomia was hit in May 2024, it showed why persistent air mobility and ISR are everything. If you can keep Oryx in the air and feed troops on the ground, you shape the fight. If you can't, the enemy chooses the time and place. As the mission wrapped and equipment shipped out of Pemba, that lesson was written in bold. Helicopters and maintenance contracts don't win wars alone, but without them, you're holding your breath. So where does South Africa sit next to Egypt and Nigeria on a scoreboard people can visualize? Think three very different athletes. Egypt is the heavyweight, large force structure, wide equipment inventory, and consistent procurement despite economic stress. Nigeria is the brawler, big manpower, internal wars that force constant adaptation, and new jets queued for delivery. South Africa is the technician, smaller roster, higher skill density, a missile in the silo no one expects from a mid-income state, and an air arm that can dominate any regional sky, on days when the spare parts gods are smiling. That's why simple rankings can mislead. Who wins depends on scenario, distance, and sustainment. Let's be blunt about money, and let's normalize it for fairness. South Africa's military burden is below 1% of GDP. Global averages in 2024 ran around 2.5%. North Africa increased spending, Sub-Saharan Africa dipped, with South Africa a prime drag. You can quibble with exchange rates and off-budget items, but the relative picture stands. Pretoria is asking first-world tasks from a sub-1% budget. There's heroism in that, but there's also physics. At some point, you either buy flying hours and sea hours, or you don't. If South Africa doubled defense spending tomorrow to around 1.6% of GDP, could it reclaim the title of Africa's undisputed military leader? Yes, if, and it's a big if, the money goes to readiness first, ship refits and dockyard capacity, multi-year Gripen, Rooivalk, Oryx support, munition stocks for the army, and a lean, ground-based air defense built around the maturing Umkhonto family. Gear rusts on paper. Power is availability.
5 moves that would change the map fast. 1. Clear the dockyard backlog and lock in commercial refit partners so that at least 2 frigates and 2 submarines are operational at any given time. Sea hours are the SAN of SANDF. 2. Sign multi-year, watertight support contracts for Gripen and the helicopter fleet with guaranteed spares pipelines. 3. Rebuild ammunition and precision fires inventories for the army so it can surge without a shopping list. 4. Scale a land-based Umkhonto layer to protect key bases and ports so the first hours of any crisis aren't a scramble. 5. Fund flight hours and sea days as performance metrics, not afterthoughts. The 12,000/8,000 targets in the budget only matter if they're flown and sailed. How does that stack up against the neighbours in real outcomes? Egypt's edge is mass. If Pretoria wants to beat Cairo on a leaderboard, it won't be by counting tanks. It will be by fielding a consistently ready blue water patrol and a modern fighter QRA that can surge. Nigeria's edge is scale and urgency. Abuja's 2025 security outlays and new aircraft buys are about winning today's wars. Pretoria's counter is quality and reach, interdiction off the channel, precision fire support for regional missions, and ISR that turns darkness into a disadvantage for insurgents. Choose your metric, choose your champion.
Is South Africa still a powerhouse, or just keeping the lights on? When a Gripen pair is airborne, a Lynx is on a frigate, and a battalion rolls in MRAPs with working radios, it's a powerhouse. When the contract lapses and the dock gate won't open, it's a force of brilliant people waiting on invoices. Which South Africa shows up next month is a budget decision, not a mystery of fate. One last compare and contrast on the human side. Egypt can rotate tens of thousands and still keep garrisons full. Nigeria can surge battalions across multiple fronts because it must. South Africa's bench is smaller. That puts a premium on retention and age profile. The average SANDF regular is late 30s. Experience is gold, but it also means the pipeline, training tempo, and reserves need love. Talent is a weapon system. Feed it or lose it. If you've watched this far, here's the wager. South Africa doesn't need a golden era rebuild to be insanely powerful where it counts. It needs to do what it already does, only more reliably. Think of the SANDF as a scalpel with a few nicks in the blade. Sharpen it, don't turn it into a sledgehammer. In a world where budgets scream and threats whisper, a ready frigate, a serviced helicopter, a stocked artillery park, and a Gripen that actually takes off are worth more than 5 glossy procurement slides. And that clever missile lab? Keep the lights on. Umkhonto isn't just a weapon, it's a promise that South Africa can still solve hard problems at home. If Pretoria pushed defence to 1.6% of GDP for 5 years, tied every rand to flight hours, sea days, refits and ammo, and ring-fenced the Denel recovery, does South Africa leap to the top slot in Africa by usable power? Or does the continent's new metric tilt toward countries like Nigeria, with sheer scale and relentless modernization for internal wars? Your call. But remember the Macomia lesson. Power is not what you bought. It's what you can move, fuel, and fix this week. And if you're still wondering whether this force can bite, picture a frigate clearing the channel, a submarine you'll never see, a Rooivalk lifting above the tree line, and a Gripen rolling in hot. That's not nostalgia, that's Tuesday, on the weeks when the spares arrive on time. Now, over to you, Powerhouse or Potential Energy. If you ran the SANDF checkbook for 1 year, what's the first line item you'd fund, and why?